The biggest issue with coming together with beneficiaries of the dominant narrative is that they refuse to accept that sometimes advocates are not interested in joining their projects. Furthermore, people refuse to believe that black women are allowed to say no and do not deserve to either be antagonized or further manipulated. The problem with the United States is that people have been calibrated to believe that they have the right to prey on black women and use this for whatever purpose they see fit. In general, black women are good prey for two reasons. First, many of us have been parentified due to our ambitious and or immature parents, so we've been cultivated to care for others, care meaning comply and repair damage we never caused. Second, most of us have been told that we have to work twice as hard to get half as much by elders who were helping us maintain the status quo and acting as gatekeepers to preserve their dominance. When I found some full time work to maintain my life in 2018, while trying to simultaneously maintain Cypress City, I realized that I needed to exercise, but not in a way that would be dangerous, as Texas is getting hotter than it was since I was a child. Fortunately for me, there was a pool right next to my job, and I went there every day after work to swim a minimum of 1 kilometer since it was a 50-meter pool. I enjoyed working, swimming, changing at the office, then walking home, since I lived 2 miles away at the time on a fairly flat path. Taking turns for a lane sometimes meant engaging in conversation, and there was an elderly white couple who had seen me on a regular basis. One day, the elderly woman approached me and we started talking about swimming, and she mentioned that she and her husband ran a nonprofit. I knew lots of nonprofit entities, so that was uninteresting, but we continued to make small talk until a lane was open and I started swimming. This happened a couple of times, and I figured I had just met some pool buddies, and since I had met a bus buddy who had a great family and they moved, I considered that my circle was simply expanding. A few days later, the woman approached me again and said, "Would you be interested in coming over to our place to make dinner from scratch? My husband and I love hosting dinners like that, and I like trying new recipes. I also like cooking, and an evening is not a long time to devote to maintaining a connection. Although I would have preferred a restaurant, cooking at home is cheaper, and I enjoy socializing while saving money." I agreed, and we set up the evening for a couple of days later in the week. At this point, I need to mention that I do not have a car, and at the time I did not use Uber because I felt uncomfortable with its exploitative model. However, I figured walking to a bus stop after dinner was no big deal, especially since I had no problem walking 2 miles after work on a regular basis. We went to their house and we had a normal enough conversation and prepared a delicious dinner which she seemed to deliberately keep prolonging. I cannot remember what we ate, but it seemed like we were beginning to go more slowly as the evening progressed. At about 9 p.m., which I figured that we would be finished, the woman started talking about her nonprofit, which involved teaching to African children, and finally the alarm bells in my mind started ringing. As a black daughter of two lawyers, I have met a lot of people who figured that they were doing me a favor by engaging with me, and this good treatment usually happened before expecting my labor. I listened thoughtfully for about 20 minutes, but then said, "Okay, this sounds interesting, so let's continue this a bit later since I have to go to work tomorrow." The woman acted as if I had said nothing, continued to explain how she was interested in my taking over their organization, in which I had never expressed an interest. This time her husband said, "Dear, I think she needs to go home and sleep because she has work tomorrow," and suddenly I felt very drained by the whole ordeal. With two people making her aware of her rudeness, the woman could no longer pretend that nobody had explained the boundary, and I picked up my belongings and stated that I would go to a bus stop. The woman not only refused to let me go, but while in the car, she made a lot of noises about how she was uncomfortable driving at night, even though I had never asked for a ride. I spent a nerve-wracking 15 minutes being driven back to my apartment complex, and I deliberately told her the wrong building since she had been aggressive. My roommate thought it was funny that night, but then was aware that anything could have happened and pretended to have empathy the next night. The couple never approached me at the pool again, and indeed stopped going to that one since I made it abundantly clear that I was there to exercise, not as prey. People who presume to believe that black women have no personal rights can be very dangerous, but at least I had made it clear that they had no chance of using me as some sort of centerpiece for their obnoxious efforts to teach the natives. Most African countries have superior educational programs, as evidenced by all the immigrants that have come to the United States to study as universities, so by no means was I interested in peddling inferior teaching skills. Refusing to take no for an answer is the main reason that most black people are now distancing themselves from most organizations. No one is interested in peddling mythology about how great the United States is when they can barely function in their own country.